how does the fault?
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Oh, where to begin? Where to begin? Where to begin?
The son of North Carolina Republican congressional candidate Mark Harris says he warned his father about a political operative's shady and possibly illegal tactics to secure votes. John Harris's testimony before the state elections board undercuts claims by his father and his father's campaign strategists that they were not aware of any red flags. Harris says he repeatedly warned his father about Leslie McCrae Dowless. Dowless is now at the center of an election fraud investigation in North Carolina's 9th congressional district.
I had no reason to believe at any point that my father actually knew, or my mother, or anyone else affiliated with the campaign, actually knew that McCrae and his folks were doing the things that have been described today. I had no reason to believe that at all. I believe that Mr. Dowless told them he wasn't doing any of this, and they believed him.
At one point during his testimony, John Harris's voice cracked and his father wept.
I love my dad, and I love my mom. Okay? I certainly have no vendetta against them, no family scores to settle. Okay? I think that they made mistakes in this process, and they certainly did things differently than I would have done them.
The younger Harris did not tell his parents he was testifying at the hearing.
Oh, the scions of the mighty, how they've fallen. Well, so let's just start with this, because there's tons. I mean, there is so much. The list is humongous today, because there's a lot of court activity. There's a lot of things going on in this crazy world today. First thing, though, is that this election fraud thing in the last uncalled election. This is the midterms we're talking about, okay? The last uncalled election, as you know, is in North Carolina's 9th district. And that was an election between a guy named Dan McCready, a Democrat, and an evangelical minister, named Mark Harris. You know, he's a man of the cloth and all. And turns out that Mr. Harris, oh my God, Mr. Harris actually took the services of a guy named Dowless, this crazy, and you know the story. They went around and they collected all these absentee ballots from the voters in the 9th district, and they either forged the ballots for them, told them, oh, you don't need to fill that part out, we'll do that for you, or they took the ballots and they threw them away, and the election was decided by 905 votes. Turns out that Mr. Dowless had his fingers on over 1,000 ballots, like 1,200, which changed the result of the election. And of course, everybody in North Carolina, the evangelical Republicans, no, it didn't change the result, and all the pundits and all the Republicans and the Fox News and the crazy people on the TV didn't change anything. But you're the ones that are screaming all the time, there's voter fraud. There is no voter fraud. There's election fraud. Different thing. That's called throwing away a voter's ballot. That's not the voter doing anything wrong. That's not the voter voting while dead. That's not the voter voting 2 and 3 times. That's not the voter voting illegally. That's the people who are the Secretary of State. That is the people who are running for office, literally sending operatives out to people's houses to take their ballots and throw them away by telling them, we collect the absentees. We're here to collect yours. And people don't know. And they hand over their ballots and they get tossed in the garbage. And now there's this testimony. We've been taking testimony in North Carolina about this election fraud for about 3 days now. And finally, without telling his daddy, you have a son of the candidate, Mark Harris. You have his son, John Harris, who happens to be an assistant U.S. attorney at this point. Not telling his mom and dad, but testifying against his own father, saying, listen, I don't believe my mom. I love my mom and dad. There's no family scores here to be settled or anything like that. But I told my dad, I told him over and over again, what he's doing is wrong. What he's doing is wrong. I mean, whatever happened to being, an evangelical and just doing the right thing when no one's looking, or, to love thy neighbor as you love thyself, or not to bear false witness, or throw away ballots. I'm sure that's in there. And so he testified that, that, yeah, it happened, and this man did work for my father, but I don't believe my dad knew. I don't believe my mom knew. I don't think that they understood. Turns out there's emails. There's emails. Of course they knew. There were emails that said, good test as if you're comfortable with the full process he uses being broadcast on the news. That's the second email. That's the email that his son, John, wrote to Daddy, Mr. Minister, Mark. And he said, Dad, if you're going to hire this guy, you're hiring this guy because this guy rigged an election against you. There was a primary that Mark Harris was involved in Bladen County, this little county, okay? And he lost to this guy named Mark Pittenger and Robert Pittenger. And Robert Pittenger won by doing this, by going and hiring this Dowless family, who then hired homeless people and waitresses and paid them to go collect ballots and destroy them, paid them. And they found out, the Harris family found out. So they said, oh, well, if we lost to Pittenger because Pittenger was, committing fraud, let's hire the guy who did the fraud. And there's emails between the family members saying, well, when we lost to Pittenger, it's because they hired Dallas, and Dallas was trashing the ballots. So let's hire him. Let's do it. Let's do it against McCready. And that's what happened. And now there's emails. So just before we hit the air, North Carolina's State Board of Elections announced that you in North Carolina's 9th District in Bladen County, you are going to get a new election. You get a do-over, which never happens. That's how freaking bad it was. This never happens. When do you ever see a do-over? When do you ever see an election get completely redone? It costs a lot of money to do an election, and, they're going to do it. They actually said, I'm sorry, but, this is just off the hook, and, your father knew, just got to say, your daddy knew. And this guy's, his son is a U.S. attorney, for God's sake, in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I don't know why he ruined his career by, But remember, the State Board of Election decided not to certify this election. They finally got around to holding it. I mean, the election was in November. What is this, February? Yeah. Finally, in February, they said, okay, we'll listen to some evidence. And turns out that the guy who was working with Mark Harris, a guy named Mr. Yates, they knew about the tactics. They understood what they were doing. There are emails between them. There are emails between John Harris, the son, and his father. And, in the test, remember we talked about this firm called Red Dome Group? Red Dome Group was run by Mr. Yates, and Mr. Yates was Red Dome Group, and he's the one who paid Mr. Dallas. So it doesn't really matter if you're following the whole story. All you need to know is that in North Carolina, ballots were collected from unsuspecting absentee voters who, their polling places were nowhere nearby. There was no way to get there. And so they just decided to get absentee ballots, and Mr. Dallas went around, collected these ballots, and either filled them out and had the same people who filled them out witness the ballot, or if the ballot had been filled out for McCready, they just tossed it. They just threw it away. So now there'll be a new election in North Carolina's 9th. Okay, that's done. I've told you. Whew, now on to. First of all, let me just say this. There is no way Mueller is done. There is just no way. There is no way Mueller is done. Something really ugly is going on. I can sense it. I can feel it. This Bill Barr all of a sudden gets sworn in as the new Attorney General, and then suddenly we get a couple of things. We get Matt Schlapp tweeting out to the American people and people around the world, well, now that Bill Barr is sworn in, this is day one of our first, day with Bill Barr as the new Attorney General. Mueller will be gone soon. Next day, yesterday, CNN starts reporting Bill Barr is saying that Mueller is done.
That the brand new Attorney General, Bill Barr, is preparing to announce the completion of the Mueller report. along with plans to submit a summary of the report to Congress soon after, according to sources familiar with Barr's plans. This is the most significant indication so far that Mueller is almost done with his investigation.
There is no way Mueller is almost done with his investigation. Whatever happened to Jerome Corsi? Is he getting indicted or is he not getting indicted? Roger Stone was in court this morning because, as you know, he tweeted out a grainy photo of the judge, Amy Berman Jackson, okay, who is also the same judge who, is going to put Manafort in jail for 24 years or the rest of his life, or unless the president pardons Manafort, right? And she's actually in charge of, the Stone case. And you remember when Stone's house in Fort Lauderdale was raided, it was because they thought that, A, he's a felon. He should be treated like any other felon. That's number one. And number two, they were afraid that he would destroy evidence. And in fact, they seized so much evidence. Remember, they were talking about how much data Roger Stone had. Terabytes of data, reams of paper, emails, all kinds of stuff in his house. So much data that his own defense attorneys said, we need an extension before we can do anything, before we can plead, before we can whatever. We need an extension on the discovery period because there's so much data that we, as lawyers representing Mr. Stone, have to be able to go through. And Mueller agreed that there was so much there that, yes, they deserved an extension. So that's going on, right? And while the discovery is extended, Roger Stone starts doing Alex Jones' wackadoodle show, whatever that thing is, goes back on the air, where Jerome Corsi was the D.C. bureau chief, okay, these two, and he starts screaming about it's a witch hunt and he's being, what did he say? Somehow he's been prosecuted wrongfully and this is a show trial, whatever. And he keeps on going and going. And then finally he tweets out this grainy picture of the judge who is presiding in his particular case with a scope and the crosshairs of a gun right next to her head. And put some message in there about how he's being, hunted. His life is being ruined. It's an Instagram photo of the scope and the crosshair and her. And, this is a guy who's been charged with 7 criminal counts: witness tampering, obstruction of justice, lying to Congress, you name it, right? And so that today he was in court. The judge actually, I thought she was just going to, say something to him, she had him seated and she had him sworn and she asked him questions and she said that he was not credible, that he can't keep his stories straight because he thinks he's playing politics. He's not. He's now in the court of law, okay? That's a whole different ball game. You're under oath, and you don't get to play your little word game, and you don't get to, be on Alex Jones, and you don't get to say, these kids aren't really dead, they're actors, you don't get to do that in court. She said he was uncredible. He can't keep his story straight, and so she just said he is now, I thought maybe she would revoke his bail and let him cool his heels in the hoosgow until trial, because it's going to be a long-ass time. But I think she understands that it's going to be a long-ass time because there's an extension on the discovery because there's so much, data. There's so much material that his lawyers have to sift through. So she said, no tweeting, no Alex Jones, no television appearances, no articles, no op-eds, no writing, no talking to anybody about this trial, not on the radio, not on the TV, not on Fox News, not on anything, and absolutely no social media. You are gagged, period, end of story, and the next time we will revoke your bail. So that's what happened in the Roger Stone matter this morning. And also, Jussie Smollett was in court this morning, and this is off the hook, too. Now, I purposely asked you what you thought was going on with Jussie Smollett and offered zero opinion because no one who follows facts could follow anything with that case, and I didn't know what was going on at all. I mean, I knew the story. I knew he said he was attacked. I understood what he said. I understood he went back with Robin Roberts and said, I'm an advocate, and I would never make this up, and why would I lie, and, blah, blah, blah. But the police were saying, no, we're looking at him. He's a target of this investigation. And today, he was in court, and he's out on bail. They charged him $100,000 of bail.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
It's like, at first it was a thing of like, listen, if I tell the truth, then that's it, because it's the truth. Then it became a thing of like, oh, how can you doubt that? Like, how do you not believe that? It's the truth. And I see the attacker masked, and he said, this MAGA country punches me right in the face.
Oh, boy.
So I punched his ass back. And then we started tussling. I noticed the rope around my neck, and I started screaming. And I said, there's a rope around my neck. Who the would make something like this up or add something to it or whatever it may be? I can't even, I'm an advocate. You do such a disservice when you lie about things like this.
Duh. So Jussie Smollett. Now here's what you should know. I watched the first season of Empire. I loved Taraji P. Henson. I loved everything about that show, Empire, the first season. Second season, I lost interest after the second episode. I gave it 2 episodes and I said, I'm out. But the first season was amazing. Taraji P. Henson is amazing. Her clothes were amazing. The set design was amazing. It was visually stimulating, and it was a great story. I mean, it was like a story of a record label called Empire Records. It was a fantastic little series. Well, it was a major series, and I watched the whole. And I got to tell you, I thought, I know his character, and I thought, wow, this kid is adorable. This kid is super talented. He can sing, he can dance, he can act. He's a triple threat, but I never knew his name. And now I do. And I know his name for all the wrong reasons. For all the wrong reasons. He faked a hate crime. He literally faked a hate crime as a gay black activist. We have a real hate crime today to cover. I'm sure you heard a little something about this lieutenant in the Coast Guard and his crazy massing of weapons and drugs and every other thing following the playbook of a lone wolf terrorist in Norway, just following this guy's manifesto to the T. So we have real hate crimes in this country, seriously dangerous people in this country, like Caesar Sayak, that no one seems to remember in the media, which just happened. There's so many of them. Caesar Sayak was the guy with the white van in Florida with all the stickers all over it. Remember that? With Hillary in the crosshairs. I don't know what it is with these guys in the crosshairs ever since Sarah Palin. Ever since little Sarah just decided to put out some campaign ad with crosshairs over various districts she had to win in order, that McCain had to win as his vice presidential candidate. All of a sudden, the crosshairs are everything to the GOP. So we have real hate crimes. We have real election fraud. I mean, people really steal elections in North Carolina. It really happened. You've got a real hate crime with this Coast Guard lieutenant, who, by the way, was a Marine before, and then joined the Army Reserves after the Marines, and then joined the Coast Guard after the Army Reserve. And this guy was targeting Democrats and journalists. And remember, so was Caesar Sayak. That's why I bring him up, and everyone in the media seems to have forgotten about him. But this just happened, and it was right here in Florida. They arrested him in Plantation, which is my old neighborhood. Now, Plantation is right near Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, so you got like a lot of wackadoodles right here in my neck of the woods. And I swear to God, nobody could remember this guy Caesar Sayak's name. He's the one that sent 16 improvised explosive devices to CNN, to Hillary Clinton, to Barack Obama. Remember that? Remember? And so they got hold of some of these improvised explosive devices, and Idiot Boy left his fingerprints on them. And that's how they were able to find him. And they found him, and obviously his fingerprint matched, and bingo, we had an arrest. Now, he was just arraigned on February 7th. Nobody pays any attention to it. But this Jussie Smollett thing, this fake hate crime, oh my God. So here's what happened. If you don't know who Jussie Smollett is, if you ever watched Empire, you do know who he is. He's, I thought he was an adorable kid. He's 36 years old, which makes him a quadruple threat because he looks like he's, 22. But anyway, he filed a false police report. He claimed that he had been attacked at 2 o'clock in the morning, walking from a subway, by two men wearing MAGA hats who had sent him a letter 7 days before. And the letter that he received 7 days before was, how they used to do magazine clippings, send us this ransom and you'll get your child back. But it was all cut out of magazines so that nobody could trace the typewriter or the handwriting, right? So he got one of those. He got a letter 7 days before this event. And in that letter, it had, words that were cut out of magazines. They called him the N-word, etc. And it had a stick figure. And the stick figure was supposed to be him hanging from a tree with a gun to his head. And he said he reported it and no one took him seriously. And then 7 days later, lo and behold, he was walking home at 2:30 in the morning. It was 10 degrees in Chicago. And these guys, attacked him, put a rope around his neck, poured bleach or some unidentified liquid upon him, said, "This is MAGA country, N-word," and committed a hate crime, and put a rope around his neck in some mock lynching fashion. Well, after he told that story, a lot of people, we weren't one of them because there was something about it. Scott felt it. Brett felt it. I felt it. We just didn't tell the story because it just felt odd. There was something about it. And I can't even put my finger on what it was. I never tweeted about it. So bite me, you freaking MAGA people who are going, yeah, I didn't see anything about Jussie Smollett, lately. I never tweeted about it. I never said anything about it. The only thing I said about it was like at the end of the show, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday, I said, what is going on with Jussie Smollett? I shouldn't bring it up at the end of a show because you won't have a chance to talk about it. But what is going on? That was all I said about this. Turns out they convened a grand jury in Cook County, in Chicago. And the grand jury concluded through various pieces of evidence, like video of two guys buying masks just like the ones that, were used in this particular quote-unquote attack, buying rope just like the rope that was used in this quote-unquote attack. And I'll tell you, what did bother me. It's 10 degrees in Chicago. He wasn't wearing a jacket. 40 minutes later, when he calls the police, the rope is still around his neck. And this was the kicker for me. He still had the 2 Subway sandwiches with him. And it just didn't seem right. But I didn't want to call him a liar because it was such a disgusting, heinous crime. And I didn't want to, say that this had happened because it's such a heinous, disgusting crime. So we never really said what, we were thinking. But the three of us here were talking. And I was like, why does he still have the sandwiches with him? And why is the rope still around his neck 40 minutes later? And Scott said, yeah, I got the same. This just doesn't, it just didn't feel right to him. And Brett was saying the same thing. And he was saying, if he's lying, my God, this, what they're going to do, on the other side, this gay black guy, claims that because, he's anti-Trump and all that. And I said, I don't really care. I just need to know, like if somebody would fake a hate crime, like why? Why would they do that? Well, it turns out that he did fake it. And it turns out the reason why is really Hollywood bullcrap. Okay? He was in a contract negotiation with Fox, who produces, not Fox News, the entertainment part of Fox, which is, separate. And he was in a contract negotiation with them, and he wasn't happy with his salary. And so I guess he thought that he needed to become infamous for being this unbelievable advocate for the LGBTQ community and the African American community and blah, blah, blah. And so he literally paid these guys to do this to him at 2:30 in the morning. The surveillance video that they got from a beauty supply store showed these two Nigerian brothers, one of whom had appeared as an extra. Well, I don't know if he had a talking part or not, but one of whom had appeared on, the show Empire, in a small little role. And he had a brother. And both of those brothers, were the people that purchased the ski mask at this beauty. Can I just ask you why in Chicago your beauty supply stores sell ski masks? Apparently your beauty supplies aren't that good. If I need to buy a ski mask after buying your beauty supplies, I don't even understand that particular combo of things. Do you? Here, buy this hair color and then wear a ski mask. I'm not sure. But they bought ski masks, they bought sunglasses, and they bought a red hat the day before in a beauty supply store. And then they went to a hardware store and they bought the rope. And surveillance video captures them buying the rope. The video was turned over to the police on Friday by the people who own these stores. And the Cook County State's attorney, she recused herself from the investigation. I don't know why. The whole thing was it was kind of hinky. The whole thing was. Well, Jussie stuck by his story. He told the authorities that two men attacked him, that they did put a rope around his neck, and they poured some unknown chemical substance on him. He thought that it was bleach and blah, blah, blah. But then the brothers were caught on this videotape, and they decided to cooperate with the police. And then all of a sudden, the story twisted and said that Jussie Smollett was the target of the investigation. His lawyer put out a statement on Saturday just denying it. I mean, like strongly and powerfully, like Putin. He's just, the lawyer said Saturday, quote, as a victim of a hate crime who has cooperated with the police, Jussie Smollett is angered and devastated by recent reports that the perpetrators are individuals he is familiar with. He has now been further victimized by claims attributed to these alleged perpetrators that Jussie played a role in his own attack. Nothing is further from the truth, and anyone claiming otherwise is lying. Well, if these are the facts, then tell me, am I lying?
This announcement today recognizes that Empire actor Jussie Smollett took advantage of the pain and anger of racism to promote his career. I'm left hanging my head and asking why. Why would anyone, especially an African-American man, use the symbolism of a noose to make false accusations? How could someone look at the hatred and suffering associated with that symbol and see an opportunity to manipulate that symbol to further his own public profile? How can an individual who's been embraced by the city of Chicago turn around and slap everyone in this city in the face by making these false claims? Bogus police reports cause real harm.
They do, and he's been charged with a fourth-degree felony. The judge actually gave him a $100,000 bail. He just made bond. He just walked out. He had a big parka on, and he had the furry hood of the parka over his face and over his head. Bad mistake, really, really bad. Now, I will say this. Some people are like Teflon, and you never know how something like this is going to either stick to him and ruin his life or not stick to him and make him notorious. You just never know. I mean, listen, Alec Baldwin, here's a good example. Alec Baldwin was caught on tape calling his 11-year-old daughter a fat pig and berating her. And now America loves Alec Baldwin. He's beloved because he's playing a notorious character. He's playing Donald Trump on SNL, and people can't get, so you never know. And Alec Baldwin just got arrested for, punching a guy on the street because the guy took his parking space. In New York, that is a crime to take somebody's parking space. I draw the line at physical violence. No, Alec, you can't punch somebody in the freaking face. However, taking a parking space, could be a crime. But no kidding. I don't know what's going to happen with this guy, and it's just off the hook that the reason why he did this was because he wasn't happy with his salary, and this is according to the chief of police in Chicago today.
First, Smollett attempted to gain attention by sending a false letter that relied on racial, homophobic, and political language. When that didn't work, Smollett paid $3,500 to stage this attack and drag Chicago's reputation through the mud in the process. And why? This stunt was orchestrated by Smollett because he was dissatisfied with his salary.
Oh, my God.
So he concocted a story about being attacked.
Brett said to me, when Brett came in today, he goes, well, Jussie Smollett is no criminal genius. This was bound to be exposed. It is such a hot button issue. It is such a sensitive topic. Hate crimes are real in this country. Bullying of LGBT, especially transgender people, is off the hook. The president attacks them. And there are real hate crimes that really happen. They happen repeatedly in this country. You have, people who go into black churches and, methodically assassinate people right there in the church who have invited them. You have Caesar Sayak, who targeted Democrats. You got this Coast Guard lieutenant. For God's sake, this man is an officer, self-proclaimed white supremacist who is planning on killing everyone.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. First, Smollett attempted to gain attention by sending a false letter that relied on racial, homophobic, and political language. When that didn't work, Smollett paid $3,500 to stage this attack and drag Chicago's reputation through the mud in the process. And why? This stunt was orchestrated by Smollett because he was dissatisfied with his salary.
That is vile.
So he concocted a story about being attacked.
That is, no, you're right, Brett. He's no criminal mastermind. He's no smooth criminal, this one. It just takes your breath away because there are serious hate crimes going on right now. Like I said, the Caesar Sayak guy, he was just arraigned on February 7th. Nobody pays any attention to it. You got this Coast Guard lieutenant story. I had to read the motion to not give him bail that was presented to the court today. It is bone chilling, okay? It is, oof. It makes your skin crawl, the hatred. And this country is so full of this kind of white supremacy that for a young, talented dude like this to use those very emotional, very personal, very present issues, that are real for people in their lives. It's real for Democrats. It's real for media people. It's real for the people that do CNN because they just got all those bombs sent to them. This really does happen. And this list that this lieutenant in the Coast Guard had like every pundit that worked on MSNBC, every pundit that worked on CNN. Just like a whole spreadsheet of people he was going to kill. It was just like, it's off and to use issues like that to negotiate a freaking contract for a miniseries or whatever that thing is, that is bizarre. But like I said, he could end up being notorious. I just don't know. Some people survive these things and they become like, they can go on Saturday Night Live and make fun of themselves and everybody laughs. But I don't know, because this is something that is so sensitive and we have so much more work to do on this that I don't know if everybody's ready to laugh it off or not. We'll see. Phoebe in Las Vegas.
Hey, Randi.
Hey, Phoebe.
Well, I'm, as a member of the LGBT community, I'm really disappointed and upset with him for having done this. It's going to hurt the cause. It's going to make
Don't let it. Don't let it.
I don't intend to, but, they're trying to paint it that way.
Yeah,
already.
well, don't let them paint because they're not artists, okay? We have the art. The left brain is on our side.
Yeah, and as much as I hate using the whataboutism type arguments or the both sides type arguments, I just want to remind everybody who's trying to use this as a means to demean or diminish, real, actual hate crimes. I want to remind them of the whole Ashley Todd incident during the 2008 Obama election. One of McCain's supporters, Ashley Todd, scratched a bee in her face.
Oh, yeah.
And that got spread all over. And it was totally fake. And she blamed it on an Obama supporter. So it happens on both sides.
No, it doesn't happen on both. I don't like this. It happens on both sides. So this is the.
I know, me too.
I'm so sorry, but it's usually hate crimes are in this country. The statistics clearly show that the threat is coming from the white supremacists.
Definitely.
No, seriously, the hate groups, the Ku Klux Klan and the Stormfronters and the Reddit crowd. These people are so full of hate that I don't want to hear about, it happens on both sides, because that sounds like something Trump would say. And it's just not. It's not true. I'm not going there. I don't want to say it happens on both sides. This is the reason why. This is such a big story is because it never happens on our side, and even when it happens on our side, it's fake. Okay,
I agree,
and that's another reason why this story never felt right. It doesn't happen with people like us. It just doesn't. We don't do stuff like that. And that's why it's such an odd story. And that's why the whole thing was an odd story. That a guy at 2 o'clock in the morning in 10-degree weather was attacked, doesn't call the police for 40 minutes, still has a rope around his neck from an attack that happened 40 minutes earlier, and still has his Subway sandwiches with him. It was just such a strange story. And the reason why it's such a big story is because of its strangeness. Don't try and, it happens on both sides. That's bullcrap. I call BS. When somebody, goes into a school and shoots up the school, they're not coming because they're liberals. When someone goes into a black church and shoots people, systematically assassinates them, they're not doing it because they're liberals. This lieutenant in the Coast Guard, his manifesto that he was, making his life look just like, that was written by a white supremacist in Norway. He wasn't a liberal. You've got Caesar Sayak, who sent bombs, literally sent bombs to 16 different people, all Democrats, all media people. He wasn't a liberal. He had a van that was covered in Donald Trump crap. Okay? This Coast Guard guy, this guy was a self-declared 49-year-old white supremacist. Doesn't happen on our side. That's why this is such a strange story. And that's why everyone, well, I won't say everyone, that's why I was so careful with it. I didn't want to discuss it until the facts were known. I'm not somebody that sits here and just, reacts. It's not the way I approach stories, and it's not the way that I tell them to you, and it's not the way that I cover things. I cover things because I have the facts in front of me or in my head, and I put what's in my head in your head and ask you to look it up. And I couldn't do that with this story because it was just discombobulated. It didn't make sense. And it turns out it was fake. And it was all for a little bit of money. And it's a beautiful day. Charles in Chicago.
Well, hey, actually, I'm in San Francisco, Randy,
okay.
But I'm originally from Chicago.
Well, how am I to know?
Well, usually when I say Chicago, no. The reason I mentioned it is that I'm from Chicago, and I know what 10-degree weather feels like. And the first thing that struck me as BS is that anybody's running around mugging anybody in 10-degree weather, especially by the lake where this kid lived, simply because you simply want to go head down from one place to the other when it's 10-degree weather. And to put a rope and all that crap, you have to have your gloves off, which is not comfortable. That's the one thing I wanted to mention.
Obviously, I'm a New Yorker. I know what 10-degree weather
I know
is.
you do.
Although
I know you
I will
do.
say Chicago has the worst. The worst.
It kicks
the
ass.
worst,
But let me
worst,
just
worst
suggest
winter.
one other thing, because I know you got to hit post quickly here. Is what this kid did any more narcissistic or obscene than a candidate running for president for the purpose of upping his negotiated value with TV? This, to me, is a perfect example for why people need managers to negotiate their shit for them. They don't have the intelligence to do this when you're this narcissistic. This is true for Trump. I'm referencing the Michael Moore movie that he talked about. Trump declared his candidacy basically as a negotiating move for greater compensation.
Well, they're both TV personalities. I mean,
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
If you're this narcissistic, let somebody else negotiate for you. Really.
Honestly, they're both TV personalities, and they live in that bubble. They live in the bubble of PR, and they live in the bubble of hype, and they live in the bubble of, conning people, and they live in the bubble of it's not real. It doesn't have real consequences in the real world. I could say and do whatever I like. I can threaten the media, and nobody's going to take me up on it.
No consequences.
Right.
But guess what? They're consequences.
Yeah,
they're going to both see the consequences. This kid really screwed his career.
I wonder. That's the thing. I wonder if he'll become notorious or if he really screwed the ability to make a living.
Well, that's an interesting question. This happens about every 10 years, Randy. This has happened with other people before. Many, many years ago, it happened with Tawana Brawley. It happened with Janet Cook. It happened with, this happens from time to time.
Yeah.
People who are narcissistic and needy and out of control, who get a little taste and they blow it.
Yeah.
Janet Cook never got over it. She was last seen literally, and I'm not kidding, as a Walmart greeter. That was the last job she ever got.
Who was she? I don't remember.
She was. You do remember her. You just don't remember. You remember her.
Okay.
She was a black woman, journalist who wrote for the Washington Post. Did a great series about a poor black kid living in the projects in Washington, D.C., was picked up by the entire country. Her serial was read by Dan Rather over the CBS Evening News until they all figured out it was completely made up. And she just completely humiliated herself.
Which is a shame because there are many stories to be told like that. Yeah, I don't remember her.
She was well, you're a little younger than I am. God bless you. But this was, this happens every 10 years or so, like clockwork. There was another one of a black student, dental student who had some obvious psychological issues and did a noose thing because she was over her head in her academic achievement, and it was really quite sad and pathetic. But it doesn't happen very often, and the greatest threat, as you know, and as you've pointed out so brilliantly, you're really a national treasure, is white men, specifically, like this guy, this National Guard guy, in D.C.
Yeah,
and there was a study on this about 10 years ago that DOD or Homeland did, and everybody gave them a lot of crap for suggesting that domestic right-wing terrorists were a significant threat, but it turns out to be true.
No, it is true. I mean, the Southern Poverty Law Center, puts the stats together, and also DHS puts the stats together. And the threat, the terrorism threat in this country is coming from white supremacists.
Oh, yeah. It always has been. Since the COINTELPRO days, it has been.
Yeah.
I worked on a lot of COINTELPRO stuff back in the day.
Yeah.
I understand.
It's really vile. It's super vile.
The history here.
Yeah, and that's why it's so upsetting when somebody who, should not, be twisting and using live issues like this to his own personal advantage when no harm had come to him deserves $100,000
fine. This is reprehensible.
It is.
This is totally reprehensible, regardless of what other people do. This is a ridiculous thing to do, and for what?
Right. A little bit of money.
Apparently, and that's going to blow up in his face. So like I said, let other people negotiate your contracts for you if you're this immature and narcissistic.
Oh, there he is.
Save everybody a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
I'm happy to see you're back on the air. I recently discovered you, and I'm going to join your network because you really provide such a critical service. Because you're a real critical thinker, Randy.
Well, thank you.
And that's what we're lacking in this country right now.
Well, sir, you're a real man. Thank you, Charles. Thank you for saying that.
You have a great day.
You
Bye-bye.
too, sir. You too. Thank you. Wendy in Canada?
Hey there, Randy. How you doing today, my friend?
Oh, okay.
On your question about why would they sell ski bags?
What is up with that? I can't figure that out.
In the hood, they sell some of everything, darling. You can go in there and get jeans, sweatshirts.
In the beauty supply store?
In a beauty supply store.
Why?
Yep. because a lot of people who live in the hood can't get to the suburban stores to buy things. That's part of it.
Ski masks in the beauty store. I mean, it just seems like such a opposite message. Here, slather this on and then wear a ski mask when it doesn't work. It just is like crazy.
I have actually bought kind of items. I've never bought a ski mask because I don't like my face covered that way. But, yeah, I've seen them in there. But you can buy some of everything in a hood beauty supply store.
Well, color me surprised. I never thought in my life that a beauty supply store would defeat their message by going, and then cover your face.
And the other thing is, on Jussie, I had my questions about that when I first heard the story.
Yeah.
I find it despicable that he has done this because it takes away from the true stuff.
Yeah.
Like this idiot they arrested from the Coast Guard.
Oh,
yesterday.
My God. Wait. I gotta go to the Wendy, thank you for answering the unanswerable yet again. Thank you very much. I appreciate you so much today. Because in all of this mystery surrounding Jussie Smollett, the only mystery remaining for me was why a beauty supply store would sell ski. And now I understand. So thank you very much, Wendy. When we come back, I am going to expose you to this motion for detention pending trial for this man, Christopher Paul Hassan, this lieutenant in the Coast Guard, prior service U.S. Marine, prior service Army, National Guardsman. Just disgusting, disgraceful, and apparently there's a whole lot of this going on.
Mary had a little man. The fault.
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
This is remarkable. To arm a small army, authorities say he had a hit list that included Democratic politicians, several journalists, including our colleagues here at CNN. He was arrested Friday on gun and drug charges. CNN Justice correspondent Jessica Schneider, she's following the latest. Jessica, do authorities know how far along this plot was? Was it imminent?
Well, they were very concerned about it, and you saw the arsenal there. They say that this has been in the works for 2 years, and the problem is they probably don't know how imminent it was. But right now, later today in court, prosecutors will be pushing for the judge to keep this Coast Guard lieutenant detained because they do say that he was planning mass murder at the exact same time he was showing up for work at Coast Guard headquarters in Washington, D.C.
Oh, my God.
And really, prosecutors put it most starkly in that first line of their detention memo. They put it this way, saying the defendant intends to murder innocent civilians on a scale rarely seen in this country. He must be detained pending trial.
It is a horror story. This motion for detention pending trial is to deny him bail. That's why there's this motion. And this motion apparently was heard in court today at 1 o'clock Eastern time. It's now 5 o'clock Eastern time. And the TV, of course, is just covering Jussie, which is just freaking me out because this Jussie thing is fake and this lieutenant in the Coast Guard thing is real. It's very real, and it's really upsetting. It's super creepy. It's white supremacy. It's right on the heels of Caesar Sayoc, who was right here down the road from us, driving around in a white freaking van covered with Donald Trump Make America Great Again crap and Hillary in the crosshairs and the whole 9 yards, a guy who sent bombs to CNN, a guy who sent bombs to Democratic politicians, and barely nary a word about it. Really, very little about it. And this motion to deny this man bail that was written by the U.S. attorneys is so frightening. I can't even tell you. So in a nutshell, what it says in these 15 pages, which I write here because I had to see what this really was. So I just go to the court filings because those are, under penalty of perjury, and those are written by prosecutors who are officers of the court, and they are, slam dunk reliable. So, here's what happened. You have a lieutenant in the United States Coast Guard who happens to be stationed at Coast Guard HQ. He's stationed at the Coast Guard headquarters in Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, while this guy is serving, and previously, as I told you, he was a Marine. He served in the active duty Marines for like 4 or 5 years. Then he transitioned over to the Army, National Guard, and now he's in the Coast Guard. He's never gone to college, and yet he's an officer. That does not happen, as far as I know, in the Air Force. I mean, the reason why I was enlisted is because I never went to college, so I didn't get to be an officer. But the filing says that he wanted to murder innocent civilians on a scale rarely seen in this country. He must be detained pending trial because, and then they go through what he's done, who he is and everything else. He's 49 years old. He lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is a suburb of D.C. My aunt and uncle live there. And his hearing was today at 1 o'clock. I have no idea whether the judge decided to, hold him pending trial without bail because nobody will report on it. But he was arrested last Friday. Today is Thursday. He was arrested last Friday. I don't know what this is that nobody talked about until yesterday. But he was arrested for possession of weapons and drugs, and they said that the weapons and drug charges are just the tip of the iceberg. What he really was doing was amassing weapons and drugs to mimic the manifesto of this Norwegian. You remember there was a Norwegian lone wolf guy who killed 77 people in Norway back in 2011. His name was Anders Breivik. Remember him? Everybody remembers him now, right? He was a far-right domestic terrorist in Norway. He was very concerned about Muslims and Europe's lily white, heritage. And, Muslim individuals he felt were a threat to European countries. And he believed that there was a new wave of immigration and that it was being led by cultural liberals and Marxists and political correctness and all. And this guy wrote a manifesto, thousands of pages of craziness before he went on his killing spree, okay? And in his manifesto, he outlines the kinds of drugs you would need to take to increase your aggressiveness, your aggressive behavior, and the way to deaden your soul so that you could carry through the killing of innocent people. And so he recommended in his manifesto that you load up on steroids to increase your testosterone and then somehow cut yourself off so your aggressive behavior will go woo through the ceiling, and at the same time take narcotics. And in this case, this particular lieutenant in the Coast Guard, our own homegrown version of the Norwegian right-wing white supremacist killer, decided to follow these instructions. And that is what he did. And he started taking steroids and mass, like getting them on the web, and tramadol, which is an opioid that people take to go to sleep or to get, a little pain, something. And he started getting that from Tijuana. And he ordered like 4,200 tramadols, and apparently he was addicted to them. And he was giving himself steroids as well to pump up his testosterone and make him very aggressive. And then he was going to follow the next instruction, which was to identify politicians and media personalities, professors, writers, artists, non-governmental leaders, global investors. Now, you remember SIOC was after George Soros. He sent bombs to George Soros, right? Because George Soros is the, Marxist, target for the Hungarian white supremacist Orban's government over there. I mean, Europe's losing its mind as much as we are with white supremacy. That's what Brexit. And this is all, Russian interference in normal discourse is what it is. And it's jacking up, white supremacy. And also you have leaders in this world now that want to be Putin. They want to be an autocrat. So you got Viktor Orban in Hungary, you got Donald Trump in the United States. And wherever these kinds of people have leadership roles, you see this stuff spiraling and just spiraling out of control. And Donald Trump, he's constantly attacking the media. Everything is fake. Everything is false. It's just, they must be, they're the enemy of the people and blah, blah, blah. And all this kind of talk actually motivates sick people. I mean, you can just write them off as being sick, but I wouldn't do it if I were you, because I don't know of any domestic violence, somebody who kills animals, like dogs and domestic animals, or someone who beats women or, harms their children physically, that isn't crazy. So you could write it off as, oh, well, he was just crazy. I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Fake news.
Fake news.
You are fake news. We are not going to let the fake news tell us what to do.
Very fake news. You're dishonest people.
The dishonest media.
Your
organization is terrible.
The fake media. CNN's fake news. I don't take questions. I don't take questions from CNN.
That was just fake news by NBC, which gives a lot of fake news. It's frankly disgusting the way the press is able to write whatever they want to write.
Keep going. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Let's go. Come on, guys. Thank you very much.
Why has Vladimir Putin not accepted your invitation, Mr. President?
Okay, so this kind of stuff, right? All right, here's what he did. From early 2017 through the date of his arrest, this defendant, his name is Christopher Paul Hassan, he decided that he was going to pursue portions of the Breivik Manifesto that instructs white supremacist assailants to, quote, amass appropriate firearms, food, disguises, and survival supplies. And consistent with the Breivik Manifesto, the defendant performed thousands of visits to websites selling firearms and tactical gear. This is where he got everything off the web. He bought everything off the internet. He also researched U.S. military technical manuals on improvised munitions and tactical handbooks. He acquired firearms equipment, and ammunition. For example, in October of 2017, the defendant purchased a Springfield 1911 .45 ACP pistol from a business in Virginia. 16 months later, in February 2019, when law enforcement agents executed a federal search warrant at the defendant's residence, agents found the following 15 firearms and conservatively over 1,000 rounds of mixed ammunition. Now, you know the picture that you've been seeing of all these weapons? That is where in this complaint they insert that photo. By the way, he lived in a basement. The defendant's residence, in which all items were found, was a cramped basement in Silver Spring, Maryland. Law enforcement's discovery of the above items, as well as other items of evidentiary value, is unsurprising, given the previously known information shown in records from interstate shipping companies and financial institutions. Those records show a pattern of purchases of firearm equipment over the last 2 years. And they go through all his purchases. I'll just, start you off, and then, I won't go through every one of them, but it goes from A through N. So you do the math in the alphabet. A, on February 13, 2017, $159.77 purchase from a California seller of firearms equipment such as stocks and magazines. B, C, D, right, and it just recounts everything he bought. He bought a Sig Sauer is M. D is a $293.59 purchase from a Virginia seller of firearms, firearm equipment and ammunition, equipment for an AR-15 quad rail handguard, carbine length, tactical vest, tactical plate carrier. Missouri, he bought a holster for a Glock. Pennsylvania, he bought body armor. He bought a hydration pouch, a tactical modular plate carrier, 3 smoke grenades, and a pouch. Online. All this stuff online. Goes all the way through to the letter N. The last thing he bought was April 8th, 2018. He spent $242.82 from a Florida seller of firearms and firearm equipment for a bolt spring, one-piece bolt carrier group NIB, and an AR-15 field repair kit. And then he created a spreadsheet, just like the Breivik manifesto instructs you to target your victims. He had it literally at work. This is the scary part. At work, he used his computer's Excel spreadsheet program. And he began to choose his targets, and he would categorize them just like in the Breivik manual, like an A, a B, or a C, to classify the various individuals' culture, their level of being a traitor to the white people. And he picked media people and former elected officials and Supreme Court justices.
Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
So these court documents, they show him amassing supplies and weapons since at least 2017. And they show that at work, at Coast Guard headquarters, this lieutenant, an officer in the Coast Guard, has an Excel spreadsheet of targets that include Nancy Pelosi and Supreme Court justice, but mostly media people. Mostly he's targeting the media. Okay, the Excel spreadsheet is shown in this document. He's got Chris Hayes. He's got Joe Scarborough, who he calls Joey. He has Senator Richard Blumenthal, who he calls Senator Blumenjew. He has Senator Tim Kaine, Ari Melber from MSNBC, Chuck Schumer, Don Lemon from CNN, Kristen Gillibrand, but he calls her Gillibrand, Polka Warren, who is Elizabeth Warren, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Cory Booker, Senator Kamala Harris, and Maxine Waters, of course, who has become almost an endangered species, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas, Ilhan Omar, who is the Democrat, the newly elected Muslim Democrat from Minnesota, Chris Cuomo from CNN, Van Jones from CNN, and John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but this jogged my memory. Do you remember during I believe it was Hurricane Maria? It was either Harvey or Maria, but the Coast Guard was responding to this hurricane, and there was, what they call a stand-up from Coast Guard, operations, from the operations center of the Coast Guard. And in that video where you have, the press officer from the Coast Guard, I believe he was either a lieutenant colonel or a colonel, he was addressing the press and saying what the Coast Guard was doing. You know, that it was rescuing people. This is why I think it might have been Harvey, because it was a water event, and the Coast Guard was very involved in that. But anyway, there was a Coast Guard serviceman sitting at his computer, and there was a big kind of contretemps among people who noticed things about whether or not this particular Coast Guardsman gave a white supremacist signal that Roger Stone had appeared in photographs giving, Richard Spencer had appeared in photographs, Heimbach, and and it became like known to some of us who are observant that this is a little signal that they give for white supremacists. And this, I'm going to show you this. I hope you're watching on either YouTube or Facebook or whatever, because you got to see it, right? So
with the changes in the forecast,
watch this guy.
Weather, the forecast track of the storm, we've actually started to reposition assets.
Here, watch. This is a close-up of him. This guy right here. See? And they try to say, oh, it's an okay sign. It's not an okay sign. It's a sign of white supremacy. And that guy is also in the Coast Guard. And so is this guy in the Coast Guard. There seems to be something going on in the military that is really bizarre. He is a self-identified neo-fascist Nazi. He's 49 years old. These aren't children. He was loaded up on steroids and narcotics. He went right through this Breivik manifesto. And he did 1 million Google searches. He was obviously an idiot, which scares me because he's a lieutenant. He's an officer. I would have to salute this freak. As an enlisted person, I would have to salute him. Seriously, dude, I would have to take orders from him. And he was such a moron that he was literally Googling, what if Trump illegally impeached at 8:54 in the morning? At 8:57 in the morning, best place in D.C. to see Congress people. 8:58 in the morning, where in D.C. do Congress live? 10:39 in the morning, civil war if Trump impeached. 11:26 in the morning, Social Democrats USA. I mean, he was doing Google, and then he did Google searches to see, do Supreme Court justices have security details? Do congressmen have security details? Because in the manifesto that this Norwegian white supremacist wrote, he advises wannabe, assassins, I don't know what you call them, mass murderers, to pick people that don't have security details. Because if you pick somebody that has a security detail, you're going to end up being killed. And think of all the people you could have killed if you only would have picked somebody who didn't have a security detail. I swear to God. I swear to God. On January 3rd, 2019, the defendant performed a search within the Breivik manifesto for steroids. The search resulted in the defendant reading page 1,464. Yeah, that's how sick this Breivik guy was. The diary entry by Breivik for day 63, which states, quote, noticing that the testosterone withdrawal, is contributing to increased aggressiveness. As I'm now continuing with 50 milligrams, it will most likely pass. I wish it be possible to somehow manipulate this effect to my advantage later on as it is needed, because the state seems to be very efficiently suppressing fear. I wonder if it's possible to acquire specialized aggressiveness pills on the market. It would probably be extremely useful in select military operations, especially when combined with steroids and ECA stack. It would turn you into a superhuman one-man army for 2 hours. On page 938 of the Breivik manifesto, Breivik writes that an assailant should begin a 6-week steroid cycle once all the equipment and components for their operation has been acquired and the preparation phase begins. Well, when the agents searched this defendant's house, this lieutenant's house, they found a locked container And inside the locked container were 30 bottles labeled as HGH, human growth hormone. Since 2016, he's been purchasing tramadol from an individual located in Mexico, though the final shipments appear to be sent from locations in California to addresses designated by the defendant, all but one of which was the defendant's home in Maryland and a home in North Carolina. The defendant placed orders by sending emails to his supplier specifically requesting the quantities of tramadol, an opioid and Schedule IV controlled substance, to be shipped for overnight delivery. They summarize all the purchases, and then it says that he had in total ordered 4,200 tramadol 100 milligram pills. Why is that available on the internet? Why are steroids? Why is tramadol? Why is opioids available? Why is fentanyl? Why guns? AR-15? Seriously. And then he bought some synthetic urine because he's in the military, and God knows, he'd have to take a urine test. So he bought a clean kit and some synthetic urine. But this is just an amazing thing that he had 15 firearms, 1,000 rounds of ammunition cramped into his basement apartment. He made 24 purchases, all on the internet. And he was a domestic terrorist, according to this charging document, and he was bent on committing dangerous acts to human life that are intended to affect governmental conduct. Let me tell you what this guy was thinking about. Now, he was thinking about bio attacks. He was thinking about getting botulinum toxin. He was thinking about, oh God. He actually wrote this. He was sending letters. I think somebody at work must have turned him in. I don't know. I'm really not sure how he got caught. But he wrote, they found this on his computer. Dear friends, maybe that's a bit of a misnomer. Acquaintances more likely. Hope this finds you well. I'm dreaming of a way to kill almost every last person on Earth. I think a plague would be most successful, but how do I acquire the needed Spanish flu, botulism, anthrax? Not sure yet. We'll find something. Interesting idea the other day. Start with biological attacks, followed by an attack on the food supply. Have to research this. Two-pronged attack seems it might be more successful. Institute a bombing sniper campaign. What can I do? I will not do nothing. It seems inevitable that we are doomed. And by we, he means white people. I don't think I can cause complete destruction on my own. However, if I could enlist the unwitting help of another power or country, that would be best. Who and how to provoke. New idea this weekend. Religious orthodox as a way for influence. Things to do in the next 4 years. Get out of debt. Buy a van to convert to diesel. Buy land for family out west or possibly North Carolina mountains. I don't know. And then he says, liberalist, globalist ideology is destroying traditional peoples, especially white. No way to counteract without violence. It should push for I should push for more crackdown, bringing more people to our side. Much blood will have to be spilled to get Whitey off the couch. For some, no amount of blood will be enough. They will die as well as the traitors who actively work toward our demise. Looking to Russia with hopeful eyes. This might explain why they don't care about this investigation. They think the Russians are the original Caucasians because it is, after all, the Caucasus. I am, after all, the Caucasian. No, they will die as well as the traitors. Looking to Russia with hopeful eyes. Or any land that despises the West's liberalism, excluding, of course, the Muslim scum, who rightfully despise the West's liberal degeneracy. Need to come off tramadol. Clear my head. Read and get education. Have to move to friendly area and start to organize. Get leadership within the community. Sheriff, city manager, mayor, lawyer. Not sure. but be ready. Stockpile 5 locations. Pack Food, GN, Sapporos, AO, clothing, gear, combination for defense, extra mortars, recoilless, learn basic chemistry, start small. Buy land, misspelled. Put 3 homes and multiple hides. Have to get out and start hitting back. Use lines of drift, written by Eric Rudolph. Have to take serious look at appropriate individual targets to bring greatest impact. Professors, politicians, judges, leftists in general, doctors. Look up tactics used during Ukrainian civil war. During the unrest, target both sides to increase tension. In other words, provoke the government and police to overreact to help escalate the violence. Black Lives Matter protests or other left crap is ideal to incite violence. Gun rights people will never rise, need religious to stand up. Please send me your violence that I may unleash it onto their heads. Guide my hate to make a lasting impression on this world. So be it. I don't know if it's truly a conspiracy of people out to destroy me and mine, but there is an attack nonetheless. For that reason, I will strike. I just can't strike to wound. I must find a way to deliver a blow that cannot be shaken off. Maybe many blows that will cause the needed turmoil. Food and fuel may be the key. If I could disrupt food or fuel 2 to 3 weeks, when people start to loot and steal and protest, dress up as a cop and shoot them. Burn down their apartment complexes, but bar their doors first. Thermite on a gas station tank. Lieutenant Christopher P. Hassan, National Security Cutter Acquisition. He signs it. Months later, in September of 2017, he sends himself a draft letter that he apparently wrote to a known American neo-Nazi leader. I don't know. This was right after Charlottesville. And I don't know if it was, Heimbach or if it was Spencer, but it's one of those guys from Charlottesville. And in the letter, he identifies himself as a white nationalist for over 30 years. He advocates for, quote, focused violence in order to establish a white homeland. He sends himself a letter 7 weeks after the neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville. And in the letter, he writes this. And he's writing to somebody that is a known neo-Nazi leader. So I don't know which, because they don't identify it in this particular motion. But this is the letter. He says, I'm writing to you regards to your idea behind Northwest migration. To date, I have read most of your books. So it's somebody who's published. And briefly looked at your website. I am a longtime white nationalist, having been a skinhead 30 plus years ago before my time in the military. I have served in 3 branches, currently serving as an officer, never attended college, with 2 years till I hit mandatory retirement at 30. He's 49, so I don't know. While I fully support the idea of a white homeland, my friends who still play at being a skinhead at 40 plus years old say that you are an informant. That's neither here nor there. It's not an accusation. The person who told me this served a 12-year prison sentence and never ratted me out, so I will not dispute him, nor will I accuse you. But I never saw a reason for mass protest or wearing uniforms, marching around provoking people with swastikas, etc. I was and am a man of action. You can't change minds protesting like that. However, you make change with a little focused violence. The government is expertly infiltrated and destroyed from within most, if not all, pro-white organizations. We need a white homeland, as Europe seems lost. How long can we hold out there and prevent, and I won't read the word, but it's the N-wordization of the Northwest until whites wake up on their own or are forcibly made to make a decision? Whether to roll over and die or stand up remains to be seen. But I know a few younger ones that are tired of waiting And I feel we need them to resettle and build a community before they throw their life away with some desperate measure like shooting up a mosque in an area that doesn't want us. They need a homeland. America has turned its back on them. I know more than a few that went this path, and it's a fucking waste. He made thousands and thousands of online searches for pro-Russia, pro-Russian, neo-fascist, neo-Nazi literature. And the whole time he was doing this, he was amassing all these items that are laid out in this motion not to release him into the general population. And, he makes notes. 12 failed attempts on an extremely well-protected individual could have alternatively been 12 successful attacks on lesser targets, executing more than 50 primary targets. Targets should be influential media personalities, multiculturalist politicians, journalists, editors, cultural Marxist professors, Marxist writers and artists, NGO leaders, and global investors. Obviously focus on individuals who do not have armed bodyguards. And his target list includes all those kinds of media people, journalists, politicians.
It's the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Well, that just takes your breath away, doesn't it? I mean, this just happened. It just happened with Cesar Sayoc on that white van covered in the stickers, right? And he sent all these improvised explosive devices to media personalities. You got to feel like so bad for the people that work at CNN. I mean, all they do is cover the news. That's it. They just report all day, report all night. They are there on the ground. They go to the briefings. They lose their press passes. They're screamed at, yelled at, whatever. And they just keep reporting the news. They just keep doing it, right? And they're receiving bombs, bomb threats, anthrax packages. Now, all of a sudden, you got this guy who's a lieutenant in the military who's, targeting them on an Excel. I mean, honestly, I've never been so happy that I'm not sitting on 6th Avenue in New York, which is, where we used to broadcast from. I mean, I got to tell you, for me, this is just like too much. It's just too damn much. It happens all the time now, to the point where CNN just reports it like, and even some of us were included in the manifesto. What? And it's because this president says these things. You're fake news. You're fake news. This is fake news. NBC reported fake news. Blah, blah, blah. And punch him in the face. And whatever happened to violence? And America is weak now. We're getting weak. You need to, punch somebody in the face. And if you do, I'll get you legal bills. And oh, by the way, police, when you're arresting somebody, don't cover their head and put them in the car gently. Be rough with them. Throw them in the car. I mean, these are people that haven't been, tried or convicted of anything. Nothing. But he wants them roughed up. This is a sick, sad society, and it's being led by a freaking reality TV star. And now you can see that this world that these TV people live in is so freaking small that they think that they can say anything, and it has absolutely no ripple effect on society. That you have to call BS. This is crazy. This is absolute mass madness, and that it's happening in the military. And we saw the white supremacy, being signaled on the TV during a freaking crisis at Coast Guard HQ. That guy sitting there. But the only reason why I know it's not this guy, because this guy is 49, and that guy in that video was younger. So it's an epidemic. Meanwhile, people show up dead. And we don't know what the motive was. We don't know bite me. Las Vegas, 58 nobody knows. What was the motivation? Oh, I don't know. And everybody just forgets, and they move on to the next one and move on to the next one. It's just, it's out of control. It's ugly. Oh, and let me tell you the last story of the day. Tomorrow we'll get into, more depth about how I know Mueller is not done. There's just too much that's not wrapped up. I'll give you an example just so that, tomorrow you make sure you're here. You remember that Mueller had to go all the way to the Supreme Court to find out about this mystery company that we think is a financial institution. We don't know, where it is or what country is claiming that their banking laws don't allow for the information requested by the special prosecutor to be revealed. And he had to go all the way to the Supremes, who said, no, they're not protected. Well, we never saw what happened there. Do you know what I mean? There's too many things that are out there. There's too many details that are out there. Roger Stone, discovery was extended in Roger Stone's case because they have terabytes of data to go through in order to defend him. You got Jerome Corsi, who believes he's going to be indicted, and you haven't seen anything there. You got that George Nader guy, that Lebanese businessman who arranged for the Seychelles meeting with Eric Prince and the Saudis and the Russians in the Indian Ocean in the Seychelles Islands somewhere. And we don't know what happened to that. All we know is that Eric Prince apparently lied to Congress and that Mueller just now got the transcripts because the government was shut down for 35 days when the Democrats took over. And so now that the government is open again, Adam Schiff over at Intel was able to send Mueller the transcripts of the people that they interviewed, like Don McGahn and Carter Page and Felix Sater and Eric Prince and Junior. Mueller's not done. What happened to the Alpha Bank server that was in Trump Tower? What happened to that? What happened to all these sealed indictments that we know are still out there? Persons unknown to the grand jury. That was referenced in the indictment of the 23 Russian intelligence agents. He said persons known and unknown to the grand jury when he was talking about the hacking. So we don't know that. No, there's lots to do here. I don't know what Bill Barr is doing or saying to Mueller. I don't know if Mueller is offloading some of these to, other U.S. attorneys off. I don't know, but it doesn't seem to me that he's anywhere near. You don't work on something for 17 months and then just say, okay, well, I'll just walk away without the conclusion. A curious mind couldn't live like that. So I don't know what that is, but let me tell you what the last story today was and why I was so breathless when I started the show, because the two stories that broke, well, three stories that broke just before the show was Jussie Smollett getting a $100,000 bail set, him making his bond, and now, he's out for faking his own lynching, which is just bizarro world. Only TV people would think that bubble is going to protect them from the wrath of the people out here who have to live with these white supremacists, with these homophobic, xenophobic nut jobs. So that broke. And then the other story that broke was that Roger Stone, the judge said he can't keep his story straight. He can't tell the truth. He did threaten me with an Instagram post. And so I'm putting a gag order on him. So he can't tweet. He can't Instagram. He can't talk to Alex Jones. He can't be on radio. He can't be on TV. He can't communicate about this case to anybody. And if he violates that, he's going to jail pending trial. So that broke, and then this. And we didn't even get to it, and this is a mind experience. You know the word I want to use, okay? Do you remember there was a very big expose written by a really good reporter here in Miami. Her name's Julie K. Brown, about the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking ring that he was running from his Palm Beach mansion. And in the end, the U.S. attorney here in Florida allowed Jeffrey Epstein to plead to a simple charge of prostitution, and that he got, I think, 13 months in the county jail, but he was allowed to leave every day. He could check himself out of jail. He could go back to his mansion, and he could have sex with whoever he wanted all day long, and then he just had to report back to jail at night. And it was a very, very bizarre case because it had to do with underage girls being trafficked from trailer parks here, very poor families here, and also the Virgin Islands and other countries. Well, after that expose appeared in our newspapers, I was stunned by it, and I read it. I couldn't read the whole thing because it was like a 9-parter. I mean, Julie K. Brown just did the most amazing job of reporting. Well, today a judge ruled that the federal prosecutors in the Jeffrey Epstein case, among them our current Secretary of Labor, Alex Acosta, he is currently Donald Trump's Secretary of Labor, broke federal law when he signed a plea agreement with Jeffrey Epstein, who was a known sex trafficker, this is according to the court, and concealed it from more than 30 of his underage victims. A sex trafficker.
And the fact is, illegal immigration is a heartbreaking human tragedy. 1 in 3 women is sexually assaulted on the very long and dangerous journey north up to our country. Sex traffickers, these are the worst human beings on earth, exploit our porous border to sell young girls and women into modern-day slavery. You wouldn't even know that. No.
His friend and his pick for labor secretary, Alexander Acosta, the guy who is currently the Secretary of Labor in the Trump administration, was just adjudicated guilty by the judge in this case. The judge ruled Thursday that federal prosecutors, among them U.S. Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta, broke federal law when they signed a plea deal agreement with a wealthy, politically connected sex trafficker and concealed it from more than 30 of his underage victims. U.S. District Judge Kenneth A. Mara, in a 33-page opinion, said that the evidence he reviewed showed that Jeffrey Epstein had been operating an international sex operation in which he and others recruited underage girls, not only in Florida, but from overseas in violation of federal law. Quote, this is what he wrote in his opinion. Epstein used paid employees to find and bring minor girls to him. Epstein worked in concert with others to obtain minors, not only for his own sexual gratification, but also for the sexual gratification of others. And instead of prosecuting Epstein under federal sex trafficking laws, Acosta, our current labor secretary, then the U.S. attorney in Miami, helped negotiate a non-prosecution agreement that gave Epstein and his co-conspirators immunity from federal prosecution. Epstein, who lived in a Palm Beach mansion, was allowed to quietly plead guilty in state court to 2 prostitution charges, served just 13 months in the county jail, and by the way, he was let go during the day. His accomplices, some of whom have never been identified, were never charged because our labor secretary, Alexander Acosta, agreed to seal the deal, which meant that none of Epstein's victims, who were 13 to 16 years old at the time of their abuse, were told about it until it was too late for them to appear at his sentencing and possibly reject the deal. 2 of his victims filed a lawsuit in the Southern District of Florida in 2008. They have been fighting this for 11 years. And finally today, the judge, after 11 years, agreed with them that this labor secretary of ours broke federal law by not notifying the victims under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, which grants them the ability to confer with prosecutors about any plea deal. They never got to tell their story, and the co-conspirators still protected. Buy a stinking podcast.